So I'm going to be signing a national emergency.
Wow, what a week. This has been a brutal week on the stock markets all across the planet. It's incredible. All those preppers out there that every time the stock market drops 1 or 2% start putting out endless videos screaming, doom, doom, dollar collapse. Hey, looks like they were right about this one. The thing is, very few people on YouTube have much economic background, and those who do right now are kind of licking their wounds and trying to figure out what to do next. I think we're all trying to lick our wounds and trying to figure out what to do next. There's major fear everywhere right now, and fear is everywhere. We were all looking at the world leaders like President Trump and Xi Jinping and various other people to try and actually help us out here and give people like me some direction and some reassurance, and we're not getting any. The reassurance we're getting just sounds completely ridiculous, and there's absolute chaos out there in the markets. So I've been reviewing my own personal finances, and I'll go through that a little bit, and maybe it'll help people out a bit, though I think, to be honest, the bull has left the barn, and I think we've definitely got a bear market here. A bear market that could end capitalism. It's that bad. People are really freaked out. Since the Bank of America collapsed last week, we've now lost Citi and TD Bank in the States, and there's rumours that the RBC in Canada is about to collapse as well, though the Bank of Canada has actually intervened in the markets up here in a very dramatic way this week. I'm just going to revisit the 1929 Great Depression, because this is not a recession and it's not a market reversal. This is a definitive depression. It's not going to be a depression until we go through the next 3 quarters, but there's no way out of this one. And it looks to me that what happened in 1929 is exactly what happened in 2019, and the fact that our politicians and economists should have known this is kind of frightening. Cause and effect, this is 1929. The New York stock market has crashed, so's every other stock market on the planet. Farmers can't pay their loans, but since 1929 farmers aren't really a big deal. What is a big deal is that a lot of the companies, because of the low interest rates of the last 10 years, have taken on a lot more and more debt, and a lot of them are failing. It's rumoured that Facebook is also going to fold this week because they can't pay their debt off either. Banks are really looking to get cash from everywhere right now because they don't want to fail. A lot of them have failed because of the mortgage debt and also everything else that's going on. And people are running on the banks. People are trying to get the cash out, and that's really not helping. And that's why President Trump this week actually followed Canada and Britain's lead and the EU's lead and announced a moratorium on cash withdrawals from banks if it's more than $100 a week. That's going to considerably affect a lot of people. American loans to other countries are going to dry up. Well, America is not the loaner of the world. Saudi Arabia and China have put the brakes on the West. Because of the trade war and because their own economies are having problems right now, they've stopped loaning. They've stopped buying treasury bonds, they've stopped buying debt, and crucially they've stopped investing. There's no capital at all available right now. There was trillions of dollars of capital 2 weeks ago flying around electronically. There's none now. So a lot of businesses that were in a very bad position but didn't look like they were have collapsed already, and a lot more I think are going to collapse. Now, if you look at the long-term causes of the 1929 recession, I think it's pretty clear why we're in the pickle we are this week. Over the last 90 years, the World Wide Web, the worldwide interrelationship of all governments and economies and corporations, crucially, have become much more interrelated. So if somebody gets a cold, they all do. Huge war debts was a major factor from the First World War. What's a huge debt factor now is the GDP debts that most of the governments of the world actually maintain. America's debt to GDP was only about 110%, Canada's was about 84%, and China's was about 55%. However, with interest rates almost certain to rise further than they have this week in the emergency measures, and the economy tanking, they're going to go through the roof. Without the rich countries of the world buying our debt in the West, we can't pay our bills. It's that simple. Like Saudi Arabia's moratorium on further debt purchases from the West is really critical in all of this. Now, they only own less than 2% of all the foreign debt in America, and they actually own about 0.9% of all American debt. That shouldn't be a big deal, right? But it is. That alone is going to crush the economy. The fact of the matter is, when you're looking at $124 billion in treasury bonds, as Saudi stops rebuying them, America's got a problem, and so's every other country of the West. American loans to Americans, mortgage, credit card, all the rest of it, the amount of debt that can't be serviced right now without very low interest rates and a booming economy is a mega problem. The overproduction of goods, there is no overproduction of goods. Most of the goods produced in the West are just garbage anyway, but the problem is there's nothing really else to produce, and that's going to really affect people. In a depressed economy, nobody's going to buy a new car. Nobody's going to lease a car. Car leasing is huge. Nobody's going to borrow money to go to college or university. Again, that's kicking the bottom out of massive sectors of the service sector. Nobody's buying coffee. Nobody's doing anything. Nobody's going on holidays. It's a real mess. Within 2 weeks, the credit has dried up. People's decisions to buy have stopped. And it's utter pandemonium and fear. Now, we haven't had industrial wage rises for about 10 years. In fact, most people like me in the service sector, we've been getting pay cuts each and every year in real terms. Whilst the elite, the top, have been getting mega trillions and billions of dollars going from me to them. And our governments have done nothing to halt that or reverse it. In fact, President Trump actually encouraged that by slashing taxes to the top earners. The top earners aren't producing anything. They're just extracting the wealth of everybody else. And that's the way it should be. But it's so out of balance, it's not funny. Inequity alone is going to be a huge issue. If this doesn't get resolved real soon by the world government action, I can foresee a lot of bloodshed on the streets. People are getting angry already. They feel they've been lied to. In Canada, we elected a whole bunch of provincial governments that were conservative. And we were going to elect a conservative government federally in October. The point of the matter is, they've slashed and burned the service sector, the public service sector, and pushed cash rebates on their mates. It's looking no longer like you can hide that inside the bubble of the boom economy. One of the major long-term causes is China's refusal to buy American debt as relationships have worsened. In 2016, they bought $46 billion worth of American debt. In 2017, they bought $29 billion. In 2018, they bought $4.8 billion. In 2019, they are cashing out and extracting money from America, and America doesn't have any money to give them. America owes about $4 trillion to foreign governments. They own nothing compared to their debt. China alone owns over $1 trillion of American debt. Now, the American government, because they buy their own debt, and the American people, and that includes a lot of people in Canada, our economies are very closely aligned, we own about $18 trillion worth of debt. Debt is not sustainable over the long haul, and I think we're all realising that this week. So what's happening? Well, what's the immediate effects? Well, in 1929, there was vast unemployment and misery. Over a period of 6 months, unemployment went from full employment in the United States of America to 20 to 40% unemployment rate, and that's going to happen again. Everybody put in protective tariffs. Trade, international trade stopped. It's stopped right now because of the credit collapse, but also we're having a trade war. But the trade war is not going to go away as governments get more and more in debt and more freaked out and trying to defend their corner of the world rather than help everybody. America could have gone socialist after 1929, it chose not to, which is a bit of a pity because a lot of the socialist countries have actually got a lot less debt ratios and are actually more likely to not have civil insurrection as people start starving on the streets because of lack of work and insufficient and inadequate welfare. That's going to be a major issue. Anybody that sounded authoritative, anybody that sounded strong, anybody that sounded certain, anybody that was a light in the darkness in 1929 got political power. And that of course led to the long-term effects, the rise of fascism, Second World War. Though the Second World War had other effects, and I would argue it would have happened anyway. But certainly, if it hadn't been for 1929, it's almost definitive that Adolf Hitler would never have become Chancellor of Germany. And that would have utterly altered the world. Now, it did start a lot of social programs all across the West, and after the Second World War, which was a symptom, I believe, of the Great Depression in 1929, it gave a lot of the G20 countries socialist healthcare, socialist education. What was good for all was good for everybody, rather than striving and beating your fellow man to become very rich at their expense. It's going to be an interesting time. I'm not preaching socialism here. I'm just saying I don't know what we're going to do. There's nothing more socialist than a bread bank or a soup kitchen, and they've already started years ago. But boy, they're running out of supplies this week. So I do very much think 1929 is going to be 2019. You can see that everywhere. It is the same conditions. If we don't handle this correctly, World War III could occur. And that could be the end of everybody, and that would be awful. What we are going to have is a lot of misery and a lot of pain for at least 6 months to a year. And what I'm doing about it, well, I'll try and explain that now briefly, but I'll revisit this next week, hopefully. When the Dow Jones hit 24,000 points, I cashed out half of my stock growth funds and put them into bond and money market funds, and lost a lot of paper rises, but I've kind of insulated myself a little bit from the stock market collapse. The major problem here is that the banks themselves are failing. So if the governments don't nationalize the banks or bail them out, and they haven't got the money to bail them out, so I think pretty much we're looking at a nationalized banking system, certainly in Canada and America. They just don't have the in-depth cash available in the governments, even by printing it, to do much about it. And that's another issue. I want you to watch this for a bit.
It will make the 2008 financial crisis look like a Sunday school picnic. The similarity will be capitalism will get the blame, just like it did last time. Bush got the blame because he was in the White House. It was Greenspan that really created the problem, much more so than Bush, just like Bernanke and Yellen have inflated the bubble that Trump had inherited. But he's going to get the blame. You always want to underpromise and overdeliver. Trump has overpromised, and he's going to deliver nothing. He's going to deliver pain and misery to so many people who voted for him. Remember the misery index that we had during Jimmy Carter? That's what's going to come back. I think that the Democrats are going to use the misery index against Trump and the Republicans in 2020, and that's going to pave the way for a real socialist like Bernie Sanders, or maybe somebody to the left of him, to win, right? And that means all those temporary tax cuts, or all those permanent tax cuts, are temporary, because they're all going to end in 2021 when the Democrats have both houses of Congress and the White House, right? They're going to jack taxes up. But it's going to be a mess when they come in. The market's going lower, but more importantly than that, it's the dollar, it's the bond market, it's what's going to happen to the American standard of living, it's what's going to happen to consumer prices. I mean, people think, oh, we didn't have any inflation. We created all this money and there was no inflation. They're wrong. The money creation was the inflation. It's just that the inflation showed up in financial assets first. Well, that's just a temporary parking place. All that inflation is going to show up at the gas station, at the grocery store, right? It's going to be in your rent. It's going to be, all that is coming. It's just there was a longer lag. There's always a lag between printing money and rising prices. This time we printed a lot of money, and so we had an even longer lag. But we're going to get hit with a tsunami of price increases, and it's too late that you don't get that genie back in the bottle.
And our policy can be summed up in 3 very simple words: jobs, jobs, jobs.
Seatbelts on, kids. It is time for Money Power Politics. Markets expected to take a big hit this morning as investors officially grapple with retaliation from China on trade. China will hike tariffs from 10% to 25% on $60 billion worth of U.S. imports. That increase will go into effect June 1st. Now, despite the ongoing trade war, the president is still boasting about the best economy and unemployment numbers. According to the president, he is solely responsible for the country's current economic success. But is he ready to take the fall for an economic downturn?
Truth is, the trade war is just a symptom. What the big problem is too much debt, and nobody wants to buy it anymore, and nobody wants to invest anymore because there's too much debt. We're in a death spiral. It doesn't matter who's president. Happens to be President Trump. He is probably going to get really even lower approval ratings before the end of next week. There's already some suggestions it's below 20%. Every world leader's got approval ratings below 30% right now, except for China, but their polls show that they're doing very well. Anyway, there's not a lot these guys can do and these girls can do to fix the economy. We're going to have to ride this out. We're going to have to contract. We're going to have to contract bigly. My advice is to start that yourself. Start that right now. It's nice weather finally here in Toronto. My garden's going to be harvesting soon. In about 6 weeks to 8 weeks I'll be able to get some food from the garden. What I'm going to do is I'm going to really focus on my garden this year. I want to get some food going. I want to have a ton of produce this year, and I want to keep it through the winter. In terms of the cash, what I can take out of the bank, I'm taking out of the bank each and every week. And I'm trying to put it into hard assets because I think, to be honest, interest rates are going to go flying upwards. What you don't want to be doing right now is buying things like cameras. Anything that's a consumer durable, anything, is not going to sustain its value. It's going to plummet before the firms go bust or recover. So don't be making big purchases right now. If you have debt right now, I feel really sorry for you. You're really going to get a real big punishing. Don't wait for the debt people to come. If you have substantial amounts of debt and you can't clear that this week, for goodness sake, look at means of hiding your assets, whether transferring them to a child or a neighbour or whatever you can do. Try and protect your assets. The people that issued the debt are going broke and going bankrupt. They're coming after you. They want repayment in blood if necessary. They don't care. There's no giving people a break anymore. This is going to be a massive crushing blow to the economy. If you have a job, don't lose it. If you have a job, work all the hours you can and be grateful, and try and save up hard currency. Hard currency right now is going to be anything that's cash or food or gasoline. Try and store up a little bit of what you need to last you through at least a 6-month period. We're going to have a massive blow. And all of those gold and silver bugs, well, right now those markets have tanked as well, because nobody's got the money to buy jewellery and nobody's got the money to buy speculative gold and silver. I listened to Uncle Al. I didn't have to. I'd already knew this. I got 3 months cash saved up. Not in a bank. I've got access to it. 3 months currency, cash. And I intend to use that, and I intend to use it wisely. I'm going to be buying food, I'm going to be buying propane and wood and soil. I'm investing in a downed economy. It's going to crash. Right now, I don't know, the Dow was, what, 28,000 points 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago? Currently, it's south of 10,000. That's a massive wipeout. And we all knew it was coming, it was just a question of when. And you can't time markets, which is why I bailed out last year. But I've taken a hit. My investments portfolio is down about 30%. Most people's are down 50 to 70 to 80%. I got some cushioning. The real question is, if the banks fail in Canada, which they're starting to, will my money be protected? Well, the government claims it'll protect $30,000 of it for me. Sure, but how much is $30,000 going to be worth in a year's time? This is going to be a long, slow, painful economic depression. Buy a couple of books. Find out what people did during and specifically after the 1929 recession. You're going to be forced to live in your car but have no gasoline to drive it anywhere. It's time to get off the debt. If we don't get off the debt, people are going to die in North America. Anyway, that's it for me. I'll be back next week. I'm going to try and figure out what the heck's going on here. I'm really concerned about the international trade war that's broken out between China and America. Each day the stock market gets worse, each day the economic situation gets worse, and each day the drums of war are beating louder and louder. Toodles.